The next game is against Gilbert Ramirez. Here we go. Who was a national master and California state chess champion. Ramirez joined the United States Marine Corps and was stationed in Spain, where he was able to play in a few international chess tournaments. But eventually he quit chess to become a professional bridge player. Who knew there was such thing as professional bridge? He did play at Lone Pine and a couple of other places. Well, Ramirez begins with Retti's opening, knight f3, Bobby, knight f6, and a King's Indian attack with g3, and a symmetrical defense with g6. That symmetry is maintained with bishop g2 and bishop g7, castles and castles. But after c4, Bobby breaks the symmetry with d6. Knight c3, now e5, transposes to the Karls-Bremen system. Of course, the fianchetto line of the Karls-Bremen system. d4, and you can guess that this will transpose to a King's Indian defense with Queen's Knight to d7. Now with h3, we transpose again. It's still a King's Indian defense, but it's specifically the classical main line of the Debrecen defense. Rook e8. Ramirez leaves the opening book and plays Queen c2. Let me show you the ECO line. Pawn e4, pawn takes d4, knight takes the pawn, knight to c5, rook to e1, pawn to a5, then queen c2. Pawn a4, bishop e3, pawn c6, queen's rook d1, and the most common move at the end of all of those book moves is queen a5. Let's go back. Ramirez playing queen c2 right here. And Bobby goes ahead and captures pawn takes pawn. Knight takes pawn, knight b6. Ramirez with pawn b3. Bishop g5 is the way to keep everything safe and sound, according to the annotator. It appears that Ramirez wants to get on this long diagonal. Bobby plays c5, attacking the knight. That knight goes to b5, and of course, he's aiming here to play, no doubt, bishop f4 with a super attack on this backward d-man. a6 puts the question to the knight, forcing it to retreat to a3. Now, a very curious bishop e6. To me, the better move is bishop f5 because it hits the queen much more active. Then when the queen moves, you can play d5. Bobby with bishop e6, and Ramirez plays queen d2 anyway. Pawn e4 was the way to keep the table level. Now pawn d5, pawn g4. And this curiosity, I would not have thought of this move. Quite an interesting one. Bishop takes g4. Jerry West says e4 is the problem with bishop f5. You're saying instead of moving the queen? No, e4 is attacked 3 times. So if you play e4, I'll take it with my knight. And then if you take with the knight, there goes your rook. This knight becomes pinned by discovery, right? Not to mention that you're moving into a pin. All right, but coming back to what was actually played, queen d2, pawn d5, g4, bishop takes g4. It gets an inaccuracy according to the bot, but I find this to be a very fascinating move. I'm going to flip-flop the question mark and the exclam and say this is an interesting move. And you can see the eval bar. It indicates that this is not an unwarranted play. Perhaps not the most pristine play, but not unwarranted. Pawn takes the bishop, knight takes the pawn, and the point is now queen h4 will win. So Ramirez with bishop h3 to attack the defender of queen h2, Bobby queen h4 anyway. That creates a terminal pin on the bishop. Granted, it's soft because he could take, but this king is so exposed that even if he does take, he's in for real trouble and a potential ladder checkmate. So king g2, no doubt hoping to get his rook over here. Now, Bobby played d4 and gets a question mark. The eval bar concurring with that, showing a dead center evaluation now. The annotator calling for f5. I thought bishop h6 might be an interesting move. Hit that queen. I do get a star for that. And after his queen comes out of danger, trade the bishops, and then play d4. Well, initially the bot said f5 was the best move. Right here. So keep in mind, best is subjective. From here, queen g5 was played. Queen takes queen. Bishop takes the queen. Pawn f5. Knight f6 being the preferred move. On knight f6, you can play knight a4, getting out of that attack and putting the question to this knight. That does leave you with a pair of doubled pawns and an isolated pawn here, but it is your best hope for white. Black, of course, could come here to knight e4. f5 by Bobby Fischer. Bishop takes knight, and pawn takes the bishop. Now knight d5. Knight takes the knight, pawn takes the knight. And Bobby with d3, discovering a hit on that rook. Now, he should have slid that rook on over, in my opinion, to keep the game level. But he played pawn takes the pawn. As you can see, the bot also prefers queen's rook to e1. And after pawn takes pawn, you can actually come over here. Let's go back. Ramirez, however, with pawn takes d3. And of course, that allows bishop takes the rook. Rook takes the bishop, and white wants to get this knight over to c4. Here, rook e5 was played, and Bobby offered the draw, and a draw it is. Ramirez accepted. Probably with this fork here, you'd have to come back to e3, and I could take, hit that one. You could super attack here. Okay, not the bot's choice. I'm just throwing moves up there. But it's a draw. It's a rook against two minor pieces, but black is compensated with two extra pawns. So they agreed to the draw. Let me give you the numbers. 86.5 accuracy for both players, and 2400 performance rating for both players. The Chess.com analysis coach says that game was pretty competitive. Black played better than white in the opening, but it was messy. It was a well-fought middle game that white got the better of. And we never technically reached an actual endgame. They agreed to a draw on move 25.